What is up, you guys? Glitchiz here, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm bringing you my newly updated Hunter build for the Wake of the Water update. I'm really excited to bring this build to you guys because I typically don't play Hunter, but as you know, I go really deep into the math and testing and in-depth testing on all the different options that we have for every different class build that I make. And I also took the time to watch every single creator I could find's most recent Hunter builds with this particular update, and not a single one of them are building the Hunter the way I am, which leads me to believe that they're either all building it wrong or I just found something that people haven't really noticed yet. So I'm really excited to show it to you. We're using some stuff that no one's really ever paid attention to anymore, and we're definitely taking advantage of the new soaked debuff that happened in the new Wake of the Water update. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. For the armor, this is probably one of the most interesting things that I found out in testing. Two of these pieces are actually potentially bugged right now, which is the only reason that we're using them. If that is the case, and I'll probably prove this with a little combat demo here in a minute to show you why I've come to this conclusion. But if that's the case and the devs watch this video and they find out it is bugged, and both of these pieces of armor that I'm about to show you get nerfed into the ground, there is two other pieces that could potentially be even stronger that I highly recommend, and I'll show those here in a minute. But for the boots, the best in slot are going to be the Drakian boots for the Veil Water Basin territory. Reason being is they give a +6 bonus damage perk against all Drak enemies, which is basically almost every enemy with the exception of scavengers in the new zone. You can get these from any location, honestly, in the new area from golden chests. I've even heard people saying they drop from the sun temples in the golden chest as well with a rare occasion. But the first place you'll probably find them is actually in the hidden temples, in the underground, like tombs, basically. I know one off the top of the head from the new area that I think I remember finding mine in is the one just north of the Dragon Dream Lake, this hidden tomb right here. So feel free to bookmark that and rerun that a bunch of times if you can. There's multiple chests in that one, and I think that's where I found mine. But any of those tombs tend to have a chance to drop this particular armor piece, which is pretty cool. So that's where you find that. But if you're not in the Veil Water Basin area and fighting Drak enemies, there's really no point in having that Drak bonus. So the next best option would be the Quetzal Hunter shoes. This has higher stamina regeneration and a faster stamina regeneration delay. It just doesn't have that damage bonus on it. So if you're not facing Drak enemies, then you might as well just run these. I typically have this and a potentially different helmet on my action bar at all times, and I just hot swap behind them on the fly, depending on which zone I'm playing in on the map and the enemies that I'm facing. So just keep that in mind. Those are two of the best boots in the game right now. For the pants, best in slot across the board is going to be the Quetzal Hunter pants, 22 flat stamina, which is always good, and a 12% bonus to our sprint speed. We want to be agile. We want to be running around and sprinting constantly. We're going to be jumping a lot, double jumping, hovering in the air. Just any sort of movement speed boost in general is going to be really beneficial for this class. So that's why I picked these. For the gloves, this is the first one that is potentially bugged out right now. Best in slot at the moment is going to be the Skullstalker gloves. This gives a flat 9% bonus to all bow damage. This is actually a stronger modifier than any of the secondary damage modifiers like elemental damage and things like that. So even though we have a glove like the Frozen Gauntlets, which is potentially better if these other gloves get nerfed, even though that has a 10% increased damage to ice damage, if all of your damage for the elemental type was ice only, you still wouldn't get as much damage as 9% from bow damage. And I think it's because that modifier is either just higher or it's increasing damage for both the intrinsic base damage of the bow itself, but also all of your arrow types that you're shooting from it. So you're kind of getting a double benefit from it. Whereas elemental bonuses, you're only getting for that one particular element and that's it. So even if it's slightly higher percentage, you're actually not getting as much of a benefit from it. However, on the Frozen Gauntlets, what's really good about it is this entire build is also going to be based around the soaked status debuff, and this gives 25% critical strike damage against soaked enemies. So your crits start doing a ton of damage when you have these gloves, potentially more even than the Skullstalker gloves. So that's why I definitely want you guys to carry these around as well. if they find out that these are bugged. This is probably going to be the best in slot gauntlet to use for this build. And the reason why I'm saying it's bugged, and this will be definitely obvious when I show off the helmet combinations, is I think right now on this particular armor set, the skill shot damage bonus is not working properly. The way skill shot damage works, for those of you that don't know, is it's only shots that hit an enemy's weak point, so the head or the exposed heart on an enemy, for example. But anything other than that, like a normal hit on a leg or a chest piece or something like that that isn't considered a weak spot, it should not be giving you any bonus damage whatsoever. But once I show you the little test here on the dummy, you'll know instantly that these two particular pieces of armor, the Skullstalker gloves and the helmet, are giving way more damage than they're supposed to, even when you're not getting weak spot hits, which is not supposed to be happening. But for now, it is happening, so that's why I'm using it. If those get nerfed into the ground, I would use the frozen gauntlets and the other headpiece that I'm about to show you. But for now, use these. Moving on to the chest piece, we want more survivability, so instead of running a hunter chest piece, we're going to be doing the same thing we did in the wizard build and running a warrior chest piece. In this case, the Sunpiercer chest piece again. This has a ton of physical and magical armor, but also has a huge 360 flat health bonus. It also has 36 stamina, which is also good on hunters as well. So that's why I run that. And then for the helmet, this is probably the most interesting one. I'm currently running the best in slot Skullstalker helmet, and I'm pretty sure this is 100% bugged right now as well. I tested things like the Quetzal Hunter helmet, not as good for an elemental build, so I didn't bother with that at all. The second best in slot is actually going to be the Circlet of Lightning. If this gets nerfed into the ground and the skill shot damage bonus starts working properly and not giving free damage for no reason, the next best one and potentially better one will be the Circlet of Lightning, because our bow does do shock damage as well, so we're getting a damage bonus there. But this also takes advantage of the Soak debuff, giving us 21% increased critical strike chance. So this helmet combined with the frozen gloves would give us 21% critical strike chance and a 20+% bonus to critical strike damage as well with those two particular armor pieces. For those of you that don't know, the Circle of Lightning is gotten from the Drak Ruin Temple, which is right here in the new area. Where are you? Dun, 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 dun. That's the hidden tomb. Spacing out. Where are you? Right here. The Drak Doll Camp, so just northeast of the Gold Rock Saddle. It's going to be just a little Drak encampment up in the mountains. Follow the trail all the way to the top until you get to the little boss arena. Clear out all the enemies, and you'll see the Circlet of Lightning sitting on a skeleton head on a table. Should be glowing red with all the effects and everything, so you shouldn't miss it. Just pick that up, and it gets you the head instantly, or the helmet piece instantly. But back to the character. So yeah, I'll show you here in a second, but the Skullstalker helmet, this is just good because it has 10% range critical strike chance, but that 25% skill shot damage should only be giving that bonus to weak spot hits only, but right now it's giving you flat, crazy amounts of damage for every hit that you do, which shouldn't be happening, and I'll show that off here in a second. So actually, I might as well just do it right now before we go to the weapon. I'll just unequip the helmet, or all helmets in general. Stop. And shoot at this target. So here's just a base normal test dummy. Of course it crits. Of course it crits again. So 738 is the base damage that I did with no helmet. We go ahead and equip the Circlet of Lightning. Stop critting. You get 741, so a slight increase because of the 15% bonus to shock damage from our weapon, which makes sense. Now, if I switch to the Skull Stalker helmet, this is 25% skill shot damage. So as long as I'm not hitting a weak point and this test dummy doesn't have a weak point, it should not be giving me any bonus damage whatsoever. It should actually be the same as if we weren't equipping a helmet at all. But as you can see, when I equip this and do it, 825 damage for a normal buffed shot. So it's doing more damage than the shock-based Circlet of Lightning damage, and we're not even hitting a weak spot. And it's every single hot hit that we do, whether it's a normal hit or a weak spot hit, is getting that bonus damage, which should not be happening. It should only happen on headshots and other random weak spot hits. So definitely broken. Devs are most likely, if they watch this video, going to find this out. And if they nerf this helmet and these gloves into the ground, the best in slot options, in my opinion, from my testing, are going to be the combination of the Circlet of Lightning and the Frozen Gauntlets. So keep that in mind. For now, because they're broken, run these two, but just make sure that if that Nerf hammer comes down and messes with these two pieces of armor, we just know we have some backups that are still going to make this build very viable. So that is the armor. Moving on to the rings. Best in slot, in my opinion, for this build are going to be double Ring of the Ancients for 99.9% of the content you're going to be doing, mainly for the same reason the Skullstalker gloves were good. It's because it gives you base ranged and or bow damage bonuses, which is a larger modifier than a secondary elemental bonus. I tried things like the new Thunder Snow Ring that gives shock damage bonuses as well, and it was not putting out as much DPS as the Ring of Ancients. The only other, as you can see, option that I would recommend specifically for the Fell Dragon boss is going to be the Gemini Rings, mainly because it has bonus damage against Fell enemies now, and the Dragon boss is a Fell Dragon. So the 10% flat damage that you get from the Ancient Rings will be less than the 14 damage that you're going to be getting against Fell for that particular fight with the Gemini Ring. Plus 14% life leech chance is also really nice as well. We're going to be doing really high burst damage, especially with crits with this build. So if you're at low health, just one multi-shot volley with these two rings could potentially bring you right back to full health, which is pretty crazy. So a really good option for that, just for that one particular boss fight. So keep that in mind. So those are the ring options. Shield, I don't even bother equipping one. We're going to be running a bow and daggers, neither of which have a shield in hand. And we like to hot swap certain armor pieces on the fly. And if you have a shield equipped for whatever reason, it tends to whip that out, which is just going to make you have to do one extra action to put it away and equip the weapon you actually do want to use. So I don't even bother equipping one. And then for the bow, we are actually going to be using the Forsaken bow. Very underrated. No one's talking about it bow. It actually has, because it's all elemental damage perks on it, the highest base raw damage output of any bow in the game. The Forsaken bow is 69. Second best in slots like the Avalanche Starter and the Drac Whistle bow, for example, are only going to be 64.4. The reason why this weapon is better and has higher potential max damage is because weapons like the Drac Whistle bow, even though it has 50% shock damage on it, the other 50% of the damage type is going to be blunt damage. And what you're going to find interesting when we go over our skills is the elemental bonus perks in the skill tree. What I found out through my testing do work on all instances of that elemental damage type. So it says all fire damage, all lightning damage. It is any source of that elemental damage across any weapon type will get the benefits from these skills. However, when you go to the warrior tree and you look at the ones for the damage types, for things like piercing, cutting, and blunt damage, it's limited to only melee cutting damage, or melee blunt damage, or melee piercing damage. So if you take these thinking you're going to get bonus piercing damage because your bow is a 50% pierce or a 50% blunt damage type on the weapon, these skills won't give any additional damage bonus. But with the Forsaken, because it's all elemental based, we can take all of these extra wizard perks from the wizard tree and boost the damage of our bow, which is really, really cool. And it's one of the only bows in the game that is like full elemental to take advantage of those bonuses. So that's why we're running it, and why, from my testing, has the potential and does, from my testing, have the highest DPS of any bow in the game right now, especially when using that soak debuff. So that is the bow and arrow. Moving on to the melee weapon, I like to run daggers on the hunter because we are taking so many points in those hunter skill trees where the dagger points are in the same thing. Plus, bows scale off dexterity, and so do daggers as well. So we can put just all of our points into dexterity and get all the bonus damage perks for our melee weapon at the same time, which is handy. And the best in slot daggers for this build are going to be the new Brood Mother's Eye daggers. Reason being is they also have shock, so we can equip a Gem of Currents on it, the same way we're equipping a Gem of Currents on the Forsaken bow. Forgot to mention that. What that Gem of Currents does at level 50 is gives a 50% chance to proc not only 20% additional shock damage from your weapon, but applies the soaked debuff to enemies on a critical hit, which, for those of you that don't know, reduces the maximum stamina and stamina regeneration of the enemy affected by it, but also lowers their resistances to ice and shock. And because we're giving a ton of bonuses to our shock damage, and our bow in general is an elemental bow, which will also end up, by the way, using the elemental frost arrow as well, that debuff also helps our hunter build as well. So it's just all synergizes well really together. And then moving on, it also has opportunistic, which is another soaked enemies debuff perk, increased critical strike chance, as well as venomous blades. And once we go over to the skill tree, you'll find that we are going to be taking all the bonus perks for poison and venomous blades as well, one of which being a perk that increases all damage by the venomous blade perks by 100%, which is basically saying that it's doubling it. Any damage done just from this one perk alone will just be doubled flat out. And then obviously having that shock damage on there and vicious on there is just good for any dagger melee weapon. I did testing by trying to put some points into other melee types like blunt and things like that, because there is a really good new one-handed mace that does blunt and shock damage, because you have to have shock on it in order for Gem of Currents and stuff to work properly. The amount of points you need to invest in that to even make it remotely as good as the daggers by the time we got through all of our hunter skill tree points, it just wasn't worth it. I would rather boost all of the magic damage perks and things like that and take some more defensive points skills. So daggers for the hunter is the route that I decided to go, and surprisingly does a ton of damage, especially against wildlife and things that are affected by poison a lot. So that is what we're running there. Moving on to ammunition types. Obviously, depending on your level, the main core arrow will change, just best in slot for whatever your level is and what you have materials for. Right now, at max level, the golden steel arrows are going to be the best for normal arrows. You obviously want to take stun arrows, especially for the fell dragon boss. But the surprising one this time around is actually the eternal frost arrow. I almost never used this in any of my other hunter builds because it never was based off elemental damage. But on this particular build, especially if the stalker pieces get nerfed and we start using the soaked or the frozen gauntlets and the circlet of lightning that have those soaked debuffs on them, that reduces resistances to ice, and this arrow does ice-based damage. So by the time you equip those two pieces of armor, from my testing, the frost arrow level 2 actually does more damage than the golden steel arrow, which is the highest craftable damage base arrow in the game right now, which is surprising. Normally, this magical arrow never does anywhere near as much damage as your typical ones that you can craft with normal materials. So the fact that we can take advantage of both, and if you run out of ammunition on a rare occasion and have this as a backup, because it's based on your mana pool and not crafting materials, you're just always going to have ammunition on you at all times. And this arrow can also multi-shot as well, which is pretty crazy. Getting 3 ice arrows at once is just pretty nuts. So all in all, really strong combination of weapons and armor, and the highest DPS of any hunter build that I've ever made. So last but not least, let's move on to the consumables. You're going to want, obviously, your best in slot health and mana potions. I take the Drac Soulward Flask for the 10% bonus damage against the Drac enemies in the new Vale Water Basin area. You're going to obviously want to take the water balloons for the same reasons I mentioned in my wizard build. It's one of the main ways to make ourselves wet, to activate that soak debuff on enemies. The way that used to work when the update first dropped is the gem was actually bugged, and even if you weren't wet as a player, all of your critical hits on your magical weapons were still causing enemies to get the soak status, which shouldn't be happening. The devs found that out, and they patched it and fixed it so it properly works now. And most people didn't like it because they didn't realize you could soak yourself with water balloons. Before, you could really only just jump into a pool of water to get yourself wet. But with the water balloons, which you can literally just craft yourself from your own personal crafting station, it requires just any water source, and then either old shoes, I think it is, what are they called, wet boots, and fur patches, so you can craft these very, very easily. But literally all you do for these, and I might as well get this out of the way now, I'm actually going to run to this side, is you just walk up. I can actually just do it right in the base. I don't know why I'm running around. Walk up to literally any wall, any flat wall, if you know there's a fight that's about to happen, and just throw it right in your face. And then as you can see, it gives us the soak debuff after one throw, and That will last 30 seconds, which has an even higher resistance negation. But once that 30 seconds runs out, it'll actually change to the wet debuff, and that will last for several minutes. So with the current set we're wearing now, with the 2 Stalker pieces, I believe it's about 5 minutes that we get, 4 minutes 59 seconds to be exact. But if these 2 pieces get nerfed and we use the 2 unique pieces like the Circlet of Lightning and the Frozen Gauntlets, those don't have wet duration reduction on them. So it actually turns into like 6 minutes and 30 seconds, I think. So you'll get even longer of a buff if those armor pieces change. So an even more reason to use them if the update happens. So really, really easy way to stoke enemies. It basically works the same way as it did before they patched it. Just throw a water balloon on yourself really quick. Give yourself that wet status. As you saw, the wet debuff went away really really quick because I'm inside my base and it removes statuses a lot quicker. But if you're out in the world and if I threw it at that tree over there, it would last for like 4.5, 5 minutes. So a way longer duration. So just keep that in mind. So that's our water balloons. If I go back to my backpack here, moving on, because we're not taking those elemental armor pieces right now, the 2 geez, I'm blanking out right now. Skull pieces, they have high wet durations on them as well, and don't have the frost resistance on them like the flame gauntlets did for the wizard build. So against like the Fell Dragon boss and really any content in the higher mountains of the Albanese summits, we can run into some hypothermia issues. So the new consumable that I like taking with me to mitigate that a little bit is going to be the pocket heaters to give us that frost resistance. Definitely want to take Prayer of the Flame scrolls. Normally this is meant for wizard builds, but because we're all elemental based with this hunter build using the Forsaken bow, and it has fire based damage on the bow itself, even this scroll will give us an increase in damage, which is nice. I also take the elixir buff and the gentian tea food option specifically for the Fell Dragon boss. You can probably swap the glimmer gentian tea with the honey baked banana. And the reason being is they change these around to give bonus damage against fell enemies, and the dragon boss is clearly a fell dragon. So the combination of the elixir and the gentian tea gives you, what is that, 35% flat damage bonus against that boss for the entire fight, which is pretty crazy. Moving on, take the Flask of the Fell for more flat stamina, always good on a hunter. And then the 4 main bread and butter food items that I would recommend you guys take is going to be the honey baked banana. This has 21 health regeneration and 85 stamina regeneration, which in and of itself is insanely high as it is. But because it is considered a sweet food option, as you'll see in a few minutes when we go over the skill tree, we are going to be taking a perk that increases the stamina regen of all sweet type foods by another 50%. So this is actually even stronger. Moving on, we're going to be taking one of the new coffee-based items, the Sweet Maca, or Mocha, I guess, in this. That has 30 flat stamina as well as 30 stamina regeneration now, which is new after the latest update. All of the coffee-based liquid drinks, they added stamina regeneration to as well now, so that's just an added benefit we didn't have before a couple weeks ago, as well as 6% range damage and dagger damage. Moving on, for our meat option, we have chicken soup, 160 flat health for more survivability, plus another 6 range and 6 dagger damage percentage. And then our final bread and butter food item, which is the best in slot for any hunter build, will be the taro root curry. This gives 60 flat mana, which is actually going to be useful in this build, especially if we're spamming Frost Arrow, but it also has plus 21% range damage and dagger damage. So very, very strong combination of food items, and honestly, at normal difficulty, which is what 90% of the population plays this game on, with this particular build, even in the final area, you can literally like 1 to 2 shot almost every normal enemy in the game. And then again, for the Fell Dragon, once you see how the combination of stun arrows and multi-shot works, you can literally down him before he even recognizes that you're standing there. I've had him bug out like multiple times because you just stun him too fast and the game can't even recognize it. It's going to be pretty crazy. So stick around for that combat demo because it's pretty cool. So yeah, that is all the food items. Last but not least, let's go over these skills. And again, as a reminder, I'm not sure if I mentioned this yet, all of my build videos, I have a little cheat sheet link and the top pinned line of the description. That will lead to a cool web UI version of the skill tree that me and a buddy on Discord created that has been updated. I double checked with all of the latest skills that have been added to the tree, and it's basically just going to be a one-for-one copy of what I'm about to read to you guys now. So if you want to come back to it and kind of reference it at any point and not have to worry about watching this video over and over again, just save that little bookmark, that little cheat sheet, and that will have this exact map of the skill tree laid out for you guys there. But for the people who are interested, for the Ranger, I like to start on the Ranger tree. Point and Dexterity for more range damage, as well as Marksman for 10% more range damage. Counter Battery for 15% bonus damage against ranged enemies. Sharpshooter, more range weapon damage by 20%. Followed by Skill Shot, which is all damage done to weak spots on enemies. That will get increased by 20%. Eagle's Bane is damage increases by 30% to all flying enemies. Really good for the Fell Dragon boss as well. Followed by Ranger. This is good for any class, honestly. 2 Endurance, 2 Dexterity, 5 Stamina Regen, 5 Critical Strike Chance, and 5 Critical Damage percent. We're also picking up Bee Sting, really good maneuver ability. Allows you to hover in midair and avoid some of the close quarters combat of melee type enemies. So I always like to take that on a hunter. Followed by Multi-Shot. This is our bread and butter damage perk. Shooting regular arrows has a 20% chance to spawn a flurry of arrows, basically shooting 3 of them at once instead of 1. Regular arrows fired this way will subtract from your total ammo. However, we're also taking Multi-Shot Spread, which adds a 25% chance to spawn an additional regular arrow with your flurry of arrows attack, making it 4 arrows at once, and that 1 extra arrow from this doesn't come from your consumed ammunition. So it's a free arrow right from the ether, basically. And then last but not least, this is another important one, Multi-Shot Trigger. This basically allows all of our special arrow types, like the stun arrow, to have that same flurry of arrows effect as well. So you can get multiple stun arrows firing at once, 3 or 4 stun arrows. That's the main way we're able to take down the dragon as fast as we are. So really, really powerful perk there. Once you start getting these points, I'd recommend focusing on a little bit of survivability. So you can head down to the warrior and tank tree and potentially pick up a few early points in constitution for more base health to give you a little bit more survivability. Once you grab those, you can work your way back up and start focusing on something like the assassin tree. Point and Dexterity for more range damage, airborne, and updraft to increase the efficiency of our glider. Point and Endurance followed by Sniper. Ranged weapon critical strike chances increased by 10%. Obviously important on all bow builds. Blessed Arrows, critical strikes for bows now restore 20 mana. This is actually beneficial, especially if we're using the Frost Arrow. Vitality Surge makes all critical strikes with ranged weapons restore our stamina as well, which is obviously important on a hunter as well. And then lastly, the Quick Point and Dexterity. We're avoiding as many of the explosive arrow perks as we can because we're not really using that arrow type. But we are going to be taking the Point and Dexterity here, as well as Bounty Bonanza. After defeating a fell enemy with a skill shot, or weak shot, basically, your group will gain an additional 5 points of experience. And then the only explosive damage perk we're taking is Ricochet. For every target you hit with an explosive arrow, its damage is increased by an additional 1%. We're not going to be using explosive arrows in this build, but we're really only taking that to pick up Graceful Stride. Gain 1 point of dexterity for every 2 levels of flame. And for those of you that don't know, for every 1 point in dexterity, it's a 5% flat range damage bonus. So at flame level 9, that is 4 more dexterity we're going to be getting, aka 20% additional range damage. It is an expensive perk, but once you get to the late game and get all of your skills unlocked, it is one that you definitely want to pick up, especially once you max out your Flame Altar, because that 20% range damage bonus is very, very helpful and boosts your overall maximum damage output by a shit ton. So make sure to grab that. Moving on to the Beastmaster tree, Point in Endurance, I believe, yep, followed by Snake Eater in Mithritis. This will increase our poison resistance by 15% and give us a chance, 25% chance, in fact, to avoid being poisoned altogether. Point in Endurance followed by Dagger Master. This is going to start boosting our melee weapon damage by 15% here. as well as venomous blades to increase the chance we poison enemies by 25%. And lastly, venom mastery, which is the perk I was mentioning previously, that increases the damage from venomous blades by 100%, which basically doubles it instantaneously with this one perk. So really powerful there with that particular set of daggers that we chose. Slice and dice, this is a good one to combo with on your bow. After a critical strike with a dagger, the damage of your next bow attack is increased by 50%. So if you get lucky and that next hit with your bow is a multi-shot that also crits, that 50% bonus damage could be a huge spike in damage that combos with your multi-shot. Quick point in dexterity, followed by quick reflex block. This one's not a big deal. It briefly increases your block value when blocking with daggers, ensuring a near miss parry that reduces stamina minimally. We're mainly taking this to get exposed weakness. Critical strikes with daggers increases damage dealt to that enemy by 25% for 3 seconds. So if you get a critical strike with your daggers first, this can combo even further with things like slice and dice. So you're basically getting 50% increased bow damage from your bow after hitting with a dagger, but you're also reducing the weakness of the enemy by an additional 20% or 25% as well, so they take more damage there. So between those two, the swapping between bow and dagger is actually very beneficial. We're moving on to Vaka language. This isn't hugely important. Vaka within 50 meters will no longer attack you unless you provoke them. Point and dexterity for more range damage, followed by Vaka culture, another not big deal one, but when you're targeted by an attack, instead of the Vaka attacking you within 50 meters, it will attack the enemy instead. We're really only taking these to get the fastest route to the endurance of flame ability. This is the same one as the one that works for dexterity, where we get a point of endurance for every 2 levels of flame. So by the time you max out your altar, that's 4 additional points of endurance there for 1 skill, which is really nice. Moving on to Survivor Tree, point and endurance followed by runner, endurance, and wanderlust. This will decrease our stamina usage when running on roads and sprinting. Double jump, this is a must-have for all builds, obvious reasons. Swift shot sustenance, when defeating an enemy with a bow, has a 30% chance to spawn a stamina orb. Always important, and that orb restores 10% of its respective resource. That gets further buffed by this next skill called Good Metabolism, which makes all health, mana, and stamina orbs restore 30% instead of the original 10%. This perk also will increase the potency of our health and mana potions by another 20% as well, making those even stronger. Lastly, pick up Backstab Mastery for the 30% increased backstab damage bonus. I take 2 points in rebound because the last one can get pretty expensive for 20% flat stamina regeneration on top of our base stats. Sweet Tooth is the one that increases the potency of our sweet banana food item. Grab the point in dexterity and then finish it off with Dessert Stomach. This is the perk that I was mentioning that allows us to have that 4th food slot. So really important one there. Once you get all those, we can start working on our offensive magical abilities. So let's head over to the Wizard Tree. Point in Spirit, Mage Apprenticeship, just a throwaway because the bows aren't considered magical weapons, followed by the Point in Spirit for magic, and then you want to pick up Arsonist and Pyromaniac for 30% increase to all of our fire damage, Thunder and Lightning for 30% increase to all of our shock damage, and Iceman and Sub-Zero for our 30% bonus to all ice damage. Pretty much all the bases of our Forsaken Bow are going to be covered. Poison doesn't have any damage modifiers, and the only one we're missing is Shroud. I did test out skill points where I did take these, and it only ended up being like an additional 8 or 9 points of damage. For the raw damage of the bow, and the fact that you have to spend almost 11 points to get there, it just wasn't worth it. I'd rather put those points into things like Blink and the Healer Tree to have more maneuverability and some more defensive perks, so that's why I ignored those. It just wasn't worth it. But in the topic of that, in the Healer Tree, take the point in Intelligence, Healer, and Blink. It's really going to help you maneuver around more. Blink is really important on at least mages and hunter builds, in my opinion. And the only reason I went this route instead of this route is because if you go this way, it's 1 point in Intelligence and 3 points for Arcane Deflection. So you're spending 4 points to get to Blink, whereas on this side, you're only spending 3. It's 2 points for Healer, 1 point for Intelligence. So it's a little cheaper to go this route just to get to Blink. That's just why I went there. At this point, you should already have the 2 initial points in Constitution, so you can work your way down for shiny plates and heavy plates. This will make all equipped armor gain 10% increased physical armor, and then heavy plates will increase the maximum mitigated damage that those armors can mitigate by an additional 10%. Point in Constitution for more health, followed by Tower and Warden. This will give us 15% magic damage reduction and 10% physical damage reduction. I also take the point in Constitution for more health there, followed by Earth Aura. This is a fun one. You emit a protective aura that reduces all damage received by 10%, both for you and all of your allies if you're playing in a group within 10 meters. So really helpful buff there. And then last but not least, the Thick Skin perk. This is the same one we took for Endurance and Dexterity, only this one gives us a point of Constitution for every 2 levels of Flame. So 4 points in Constitution at max level there, giving us a ton of extra health as well, making us super tanky for a Hunter, which is really nice. So that is the final revamped Hunter skill tree. Again, links will be down in the description for the cheat sheet if you guys want to go back and forth and reference this as much as you want. So be sure to check that out. So the only thing at this point left to do is to pop all of our consumable items and buffs that we would typically have if we're running out and see what our final stats are. So we got the Macaw buff that'll give us bonus to scavengers. I think I hid my dog because it was barking too much. You can get the pause touch buff from them, which will increase your health by 25 points. We'll throw on the Drac potion for the new Veil Water Basin area. Our 4 main food items: chicken soup, the taro soup, the malka, and the banana, followed by a stamina potion, spell elixir, Prayer of the Flame Scroll for increased fire damage. And with all of those buffs combined, here is where we're sitting. We go over to attributes here. Main attributes: 1,420 health, 360 mana, and 614 stamina. An insane amount of stamina on this build, and 148% range damage. For primary points, we're sitting at 16 Constitution, 10 Spirit, 19 Endurance, insane amounts of stamina, 8 Strength, 21 Dexterity, which is pretty much the max Dexterity you can get. We've took every Dexterity point possible on the tree, and 9 Intelligence. Healing, not a huge deal. Health regeneration, not a huge deal. But we have 494 stamina regeneration and a 0.25 second regeneration delay, which is insane. You literally never run out of stamina with this build. Moving on to damage, this is pretty crazy. We have 155% critical damage and 30% critical chance. That's only because we're using these skull pieces right now. If we swap eventually, if those 2 pieces get nerfed, to the Frozen Gauntlets and the Circlet of Lightning, those will give 21% increased critical strike chance against soaked enemies and another 20% bonus or 25% bonus to critical strike damage, which neither of which are reflected in these stats right now. So the potential for those percentages to get even higher is there as well. So keep that in mind. Backstab damage 40% because of the skills. Skill shot damage is at 88 because of our 2 armor pieces. 15% bonus damage to all ranged enemies. 30% bonus to all flying enemies. 16% bonus to all Drac because of the Drac potion and our Draconian boots there. 20% bonus to Fell because we popped the Frenzy potion. This would actually be 35 if we swapped out the banana food for the Gentian tea that I mentioned. 20% bonus damage to scavengers because of the Macaw buff. And then for our weapon damage, we have 39% for bows, 48% for daggers, and then for elemental, because this is an elemental build, we're getting a ton of bonuses here as well. 50% increased bonus to fire, 30% increase to ice, which will be increased to 45 if we eventually switch to the Frozen Gauntlets, and 30% for shock damage, which would also get boosted to 45 once we equip the Circlet of Lightning. So bigger elemental damage bonuses potentially on the horizon if they fix the bugs with the skull set pieces. So as you can see, very well balanced. If we go to protection, we're pretty even. 477 armor for physical and 334 for magical. Ideally, we'd have a little bit more magical protection, but because we're really dodgy and we're not really on the ground that much, we can kind of get away with it, and we just get a ton of bonus damage against ranged enemies anyway. So they typically die in 1 or 2 hits, so not a huge deal. And then our just base stats are through the roof as well. So crazy, crazy, crazy. So yeah, that is the build, you guys. I'll say goodbye now and leave you with a really cool combat demo, probably showing off how quickly we can take down the Fell Dragon boss, even after the update with this build now, and maybe a couple other of the end game zone bosses as well, or not bosses, but like higher brute enemies. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, if you tested out and you're liking it, be sure to smash that like button, comment down below. I appreciate all of your guys' feedback. If you want to keep up to date on my future Enshrouded content, I know I still have my warrior build to make and get out to you guys. Consider subscribing and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of those future updates. And last but not least, if you want to join a killer community of like-minded gamers, feel free to check the links down in the description and join us on the Discord. Got over 1,000 members in there now, many of which are playing Enshrouded and always looking for new people to play with. So hopefully you guys jump in and we see you all around here soon. But until the next one, hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you all later.